I'm going to tell you a story. I had a perfect life. I had a wonderful house, I had an amazing husband, 2 beautiful children. I was a senior vice president. I made the most money I'd been making in my entire life. And I got a phone call. I got a phone call asking me if I'd be interested in a job. And I said, no, thank you. I have a great job. They said, would you mind taking a look at this job? I took a look at the job, and it was actually kind of fascinating. It blended everything I cared about. It was about children, it was about food, it was about hunger. But I still said, I have a perfect life. So I didn't do anything. I got a call 2 weeks later, same person. I know you said no, but would you consider a cup of coffee? And, as you'll learn later about the intoxicating effects of really good coffee from Mokhtar, I said yes. I said yes to a man named Billy Shore, who had been running an organization called Share Our Strength, which was focused on ending childhood hunger in America. And in an hour, over a cup of coffee, I heard things I could not believe. I learned that 16 million children in America go hungry every day. I learned that on snow days, the days that were the most joyful days for my children because they wore snow pants and drank hot cocoa and sledded all day, were days of profound misery for children who relied on school for food. Children who would go to their schools and pull on doors hoping that something would open. I learned about 6-year-old boys who got on bicycles and rode down the side of a highway to get to a feeding station to get a free lunch to bring home to their 4-year-old sister. And in that conversation, in that 1 cup of coffee, I just learned things that I could not turn back on. So what did I do? I quit my senior vice president job. I took a $75,000 pay cut. I gave up 20 years of working in healthcare into an industry I knew nothing about, simply because it all made sense. It was the moment where it all came together. If I'm going to work and not be with my children, it should stand for something. It should mean something. And I, if nothing else, am someone who loves to solve problems. And childhood hunger in America is a solvable problem. This is part of my story. Raise your hand if you have a job that you thought you would have when you were a kid. 1, 2, amazing, 3, 4. I love asking this question. Shout out the thing that you thought you were going to be as a child. I'll start. I thought I was going to have a hot dog stand in Hawaii. Just telling you, I had a vast imagination as a child. Everyone just say out loud what you thought you were going to be as a child. Say what you are now. So you're about to hear extraordinary moments about epiphanies, and yet every single one of us at a point in our life makes a choice to do something different. I am thrilled to invite you into an hour plus of listening to some of the most extraordinary moments of epiphany, moments of I can't turn back and I am going to make my life to be something else. I'm not going to bother introducing any of these people because their stories are their introduction into their life. All I can say is turn off your phone. We're not talking about scale. We're not talking about fundraising. We're not talking about anything other than extraordinary human lives and the potential we all have when we see things and we marry them with our imagination and we open ourselves up to the life of possibility. So with that, get comfortable and welcome our first speaker.
Can you hear me? I'm here to talk to you today about scale and fundraising. I'm kidding, of course. So it's my strong suspicion that everybody in this room is running away from something.
Great coat.
I know. That's why I'm here. And everybody in this room is also chasing after something else. We're running away from our past failures. We're running away from feelings of insecurity that tell us we don't deserve to be sitting in rooms like this. with people as beautiful and accomplished as many of you are. We're running away from the weighty expectations of our loved ones and colleagues. We're also chasing endlessly after cures for incurable diseases, solutions to structural issues that plague us across the globe. Some of us are chasing after the feeling of writing our names on the pages of history, and that's okay too. I am. But while we move forward through the inertia of successes and pitfalls, it can be very easy for us to forget why we made these journeys of social entrepreneurship in the first place. My path hasn't always been quite so clear. At the moment, I stand before you as a designer of a brand that uses fashion as a vehicle to tell stories about marginalized populations, people who happen to be on the outskirts of society, people who have been ignored and disregarded historically for reasons none other than the way they look, their ethnicity, or where they happen to be born. My work makes an effort to champion these people, show that they are noble, elegant, and make the point that beauty has no particular hue, border, or passport color. And it's work that has put me on screens. I've been involved with a small independent film some of you may have heard of called Black Panther. It was fine. It's an okay gig. You can forget it. It's all right. But my path hasn't always been quite so clear. Before I embarked on the journey of being like a ridiculous designer clothing person, I was on the even more ridiculous life of being a corporate attorney at a big firm in Philadelphia in the US. And my job was essentially to help prop up large conglomerates that keep their money by silencing the voices of powerless individuals. Also a good gig if you can get it. It's very lucrative. But it tends to keep you up at night endlessly, because for most of us, this isn't what we woke up and thought we wanted to do. I think many of us work really, really hard and we do a really, really good job, a great job. Doing a good or a great job doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing good or great work. So, somebody who has strong convictions, somebody who's relatively creative, somebody who has opinions about fixing the world is not necessarily somebody who's conducive to sitting in a cubicle and figuring out ways to get plaintiffs who've been harmed to go away. I have a specific memory of sitting in a conference room with a room full of well-meaning, wealthy lawyers. We were discussing a specific document about one of our clients. And a partner said we have to be very discreet about the information in this document because if we let it get out, it might reveal how our clients have been harming innocent children. So I'm sitting there like, you know, you're X years old, very accomplished, you spent this time accruing these credentials and this knowledge, and you're essentially, to use a nerdist Star Wars analogy, working on the Death Star, and Darth Vader is your boss. And this is it, really, this is life. And so you have a mortgage, you have a kid, you have a family, but is this essentially what one wants to do with his life, and is this the legacy that we all choose to have? And I think this is a dilemma many of us have. We have organizations we work for, run by well-meaning people, but doing work that is ultimately not beneficial or not a net positive. And so I had to ask myself if this is really what I was here for. I thought not. So instead of spending my time silencing the voices of people who have no power, I set out to do the opposite. I use art to tell stories about people who have smaller voices but large things to say. I think for a lot of us, we think about epiphanies as things that strike us like lightning bolts. We jump out of the tub, we stop mid-thought, and we have a life-changing moment. For me and for many others, I found it's a glacial progression towards enlightenment, if you will. The idea that there are things we can do really well, but then the things we're also made to do. And so bookending this discovery about how I could be a mediocre lawyer working for terrible people, or I could be a champion for the unchampioned, that to me was a story I would rather tell myself, a story I can tell my kids for them to be proud of. The idea that they can say, my dad didn't just make clothes, he made people have better lives for themselves. And by the way, this is not me making things happen. This is me giving people agency, putting them in a vehicle where they're seen as human, nuanced individuals. It's not whitewashing people's stories, it's just showing that they're complete and whole, just as all of us are. So if there's anything I've learned from this, it's the idea that no work is wasted. So in spite of our pitfalls, our accidents, our mistakes, these are all things that make us go harder, further, and better, because they teach us and they inform the next step. So I think, despite the things we run away from, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because they can push us towards the things we should be looking towards. Thank you.
So the format here, after each speaker, I'm going to ask them each a couple of questions. We're going to ask you to hold yours. And if we manage our time carefully, we'll have about 20, 25 minutes at the end to open it up for everyone. You referenced Black Panther.
I did.
So Black Panther, right now, is the highest grossing superhero film ever in America, and the most tweeted about film ever. And yet, it's in an industry where it is rare to see Black filmmakers, Black talent, Black directors, Black anything. I did a little research after I met Wale, and I found out the fashion industry is almost the same. In 203 fashion shows at Fashion Week in New York, 3 were showcasing African-American designers. And so my question for you, we talked about this, think about this juxtaposition in the arts of so much of one color having control over so much of the tapestry of how we learn about beauty and storytelling. Where do we go from here? How do we start to change this narrative?
Sure. So I think the thing when we think about beauty, I'm glad you brought that word up. It's the idea that what is beauty for? What does it do for us? It inspires us to be better, to think about our lives in different, abstract, and great ways. You walk into a museum, you see a Caravaggio, a Da Vinci, you recognize yourself in it. It's gorgeous. Except you may not recognize yourself because you may be of a certain hue that is not pictured in these museums. You watch a film, you might see a version of yourself, if you do at all, that is a caricature of who you are. You open a magazine, you might see people who are, how to put this tactfully, humanly very unique to the rest of us. So the arts have great power to inspire. They also have power to make us feel insecure and to make us shrink and to shrink who we are. But representation does the opposite of that. When we allow more of us to come into these spaces, people of different hues, different cultures, different physical shapes, different languages, we're enriched because we all get to learn from each other, and we're all more inspired because our kids can walk into a museum and see a Da Vinci that's gorgeous, but also a Basquiat next to it. And they can recognize that the highest apex of beauty also includes them. And that way, when they think of high art, it's not a discussion that excludes them, whoever they may be. So for me, fashion is, to be frank, I can really talk about clothes. It's really just a vehicle for the idea of inclusion culturally and allowing people of all cultures to share in the discussion about how we can make ourselves better.
Amazing. What's the next step on your career journey?
Scalability and funding. I'm kidding. Honestly, I don't know. It's interesting because this is shockingly an untapped thing. The idea of using art to make people feel better is like gasp. This is not just for money. So like we don't quite know what to do with this. And for me, it's just about having these conversations and using, it's essentially a sleight of hand. You come for the pretty clothes, you leave for the enlightenment about culture. And so what happens when people with more resources do this on a grander scale? To me, that's where we're in such an era of this for many reasons. And so maybe we have to trick each other into looking at things that make us think about ourselves in more human ways. And that's what art is for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk about intimidation.